Hey, it's Ollie, and in this video I am going to do something a little bit unexpected. I'm going to tell you about some regrets that I have about my own language learning. Now, I speak a number of languages. I've learned over 10 languages. I don't speak all of those anymore. A lot of time has passed. And so, some people would hear that and think, well, what on earth do you have to regret? But actually, I do have some regrets. Even with all of the the success I've had with language learning, I do regret how I've spent some of my time. And so hopefully, when I tell you about some of these things, that will give you maybe some perspective on what you're trying to do in your own learning, especially if you're kind of at the beginning of that journey yourself and you're wondering how you should spend your time. So the first regret I have is not committing to languages for longer periods of time. I think at certain points in my life I've been in a bit of a rush to learn more languages, and it hasn't helped, I think, doing what I do, like being online and sort of having this having a YouTube channel where part of what I do is show you how I learn languages. If I were to have my time again, I would prefer to commit to a smaller number of languages and not to pressure myself into saying, right, I have to learn this language in the next year or 2 years, but to say, this is a language I want to have for the rest of my life, and I'm going to commit to this for a period of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and to be happy with that approach and that speed. I do regret not doing that, because I would have ended up with more languages as a meaningful part of my life and to a higher level as well. Regret number 2 is not developing a reading habit earlier. Now, I think when I was younger, I've always enjoyed reading, but I found reading hard in foreign languages because it is hard, right? But one of the reasons I didn't like to sit down and spend time reading was that I didn't like to be alone, and I would always kind of want to go out and be with people. I thought that I derived all of my energy from being around people and speaking. But what I've realized in recent years is that reading really is what has all of the power in language learning. By developing a reading habit, you can just learn so much faster than anything else you can imagine. And also, if you are someone who really enjoys speaking and being with people, and you want to learn faster, well, reading is the thing that's going to allow you to learn faster. The other problem, I think, was I didn't really try to read things that were aligned with my interests. I'd often read things that I thought you should read. But again, if I was gonna go back, what I would do is I would find things to read in my target languages on areas of real interest to me, and just try to develop that habit by doing a small amount each day, because I would have learnt my languages so much faster. I'd be more articulate. I'd be better read, and in the case of languages with different scripts, I would be so much better at actually reading those languages. So I regret not developing a reading habit earlier. Regret number 3 is a very personal one to me, but that is when I went to Japan, I wasted the first 1 or 2 years not working that hard and not studying that hard. The effect was that when I eventually left Japan, I was only just kind of finding my feet. So what I took from this is that when I first arrived in Japan, I was kind of lonely, to be honest with you. I was by myself, didn't have any friends, and of course I made friends over time. But establishing a new life for yourself in a new country, especially somewhere like Japan with very different culture, takes time. And so, like, my number one priority was just kind of being okay. So finding things to do, places to go, friends to be with, and obviously that's important. It's also one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of moving abroad to learn languages, because when you do move abroad, you have other considerations, right, other than just learning the language. But what I regret not doing is devoting time each and every day to actually learning while I was there, because I would have just moved so much faster. It breaks one of my golden rules of language learning, which is being consistent. A small amount of work every single day consistently is going to get you so much further than anything else. So I really regret those first couple of years in Japan. Again, a certain amount of this comes down to immaturity, but also not really understanding the power of consistency. My fourth big regret, which again is personal to me but valuable for those of you learning Asian languages in particular, is that when I was learning Japanese and later Cantonese, I never sat down and put the necessary time in to learn to read and write Chinese characters, or kanji in Japanese, and then so that really prevented me developing a reading habit in Japanese because my kanji was just not strong enough. And then later when I moved on to learn Cantonese, I had the task of learning traditional Chinese characters, and it was, that's not the kind of learning challenge that I'm good at personally, but that's just an excuse. I regret not sitting down and spending a year or two really working harder at being able to read Chinese characters, because that really kept a bit of a glass barrier around how far I could progress with the languages. And now at this point in my life, when those languages are not such I'm not so motivated to keep progressing in those languages, it's very difficult for me to justify spending years focusing on learning to read and write Chinese characters. So in a way, I kind of feel like it's too late for me, which is not to say the need or the desire won't come back at some point in the future, but I consider it a real missed opportunity back at the time when I was actively learning these languages not to have really sat down and devoted more time and attention to them. So my tip for anybody learning Chinese, Cantonese, Japanese, any language like that, learn to read from the beginning. Is going to save you so much heartache later on. Now, regret number 5 is trying to be someone that I wasn't. Now, what do I mean by this? When I first went to, I moved abroad, I was 19 years old and I went to live in Paris. And, when I was 19, I didn't know anything. I was an idiot. I was like a typical 19-year-old English kid. I knew nothing about anything. And knew nothing about anything. Is that right? Anyway, all I knew at the time was that, okay, I want to learn French, but I didn't know really what it meant to learn a language. And so I would do things like I would feel this need to be. I thought like learning French was about going and always be speaking to people. So I'd stop and speak to people on the street. I'd try and make friends with everyone that I met. I remember there was one point in the center of Paris, there was a guy who was doing like cartoon drawings in front of one of the tourist attractions there. And I was kind of trying to practice my French with him, and he was trying to persuade me to let him draw up my portrait, and I was trying to make friends with him. It was like, I was trying to do these things that I thought I should do, but I now know with hindsight that that's just not me. I don't like doing things that way. So I was trying to be someone that I wasn't, based on a kind of false perception of what one should do when learning a language. So my regret is not spending longer trying to get to know who I was and aligning my learning with my personality, because now that I've managed to do that, and my story learning method is one that is completely aligned with my personality. It's not only extremely effective, but it's how I like to learn. And I think that's why when people discover story learning, they find it, they either it's like Marmite, they either love it or hate it. But the people that love it really love it because it's like nothing they found before, because it just gels with how they like to learn. It took me a long time to discover what my personality, my learning style is, and I think that caused me unnecessary unhappiness and stress, actually, especially back then in France when I was super young and didn't know any better. So the takeaway here is to not try to mold your personality around your language learning, but to do the opposite and try to mold your language learning around you and your personality. Get to know yourself. Now, it would have saved me a lot of anguish and heartache in general in my life if I just got to know myself better. There's a big tip there. Regret number 6 is pushing myself too hard when it wasn't the right time. There have been occasions in the last few years, especially when I've been learning new languages like Cantonese, like Thai, for example, when I just put myself under all this pressure. And I think, again, this internet existence really didn't help. But I kind of told myself, right, I really need to, unless I'm studying 3 hours a day, I'm just not being serious, right? Or after I did my Thai project, which you can find on YouTube, I went to Thailand and learned Thai in 14 days. It was super cool. But then I kind of went home and thought, right, now I have to keep this up, and otherwise it's a total waste of time. And so I kept taking lessons for months after that, and putting myself under this pressure when actually it just wasn't necessary. And there have been times in my life when I've put a lot of pressure on myself when it wasn't necessary, and that's probably made me unhappy and more stressed than I need to be. And so relating to that is the idea that it's okay to let go of languages. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to stop doing something that doesn't bring you joy. There's nothing wrong with that, and I regret not appreciating that sooner. And then my last regret, number 7, is linking my self-worth with my language performance. And this is I feel like this is a very deep psychological thing for me. I don't know if you relate to this or not, but often, like, part of the fascination of learning languages for me has always been to be able to connect with people in other cultures. I've always loved the ability to kind of transform into a different person. Like when I speak, I always use the example of Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese with this, because for me, speaking Portuguese really means becoming a different person. And I love that. It's exhilarating to kind of become this different person, adopt this different personality. And so at times that's been very, very helpful, but there have also been times where I've taken it so seriously that I've linked my entire self-worth to that language. And so when I've had difficult language learning experiences, like Japanese was for me, I would often kind of just link my happiness with how well I kind of performed in the language in that day. And if I had a kind of really disastrous language learning experience, I mean, older readers may remember my post on the worst language exchange ever, which happened in Hong Kong. And when these things happen, I'm susceptible to let that really just give my confidence a knock, and take it more seriously than I really should. So I guess the regret here is not taking it so seriously. So those are my 7 big regrets in language learning. I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. If any of this resonated with you, if there are any that you can relate to, or if you have any yourself, let me know in the comments. And like the video, you know what to do. And I'll see you in the next one.